Hello, everyone. It was a pleasure to see your work last week. Several aspects of how you initially approached your projects made me reflect on how I might move forward with my own. Maria, your series of prints on folded paper and projections onto an existing structure made me consider the legibility of my letter if I were to remove it from being strung up. What would happen if I let my letter fold in on itself? And Rosie, the deconstruction of your letter form onto different planes made me wonder what might happen if I incorporated more distance and separation into my setup. Would the letter form still be legible? I also appreciated your feedback, Martin, regarding the points of the letter form. Despite my initial inspiration coming from a Lite-Brite, I wasn't interested in the lights. I was more concerned with the wire's textile-like quality within the plastic. There was a soft cadence to its rhythm, though it followed a strict grid. The wire gently folded on top of itself like ribbon. How and what do I introduce to interplay within the existing structure? So you can discern from my editing style, those are the 3 questions I decided to focus on this week. I wanted to approach the questions systematically so that I could understand and deconstruct what appealed to me in each experiment. I went back to the existing setup and began slowly disassembling and misassembling the structure, documenting the entire process. I freed corners and let the structure spin. I tied up corners to the top of the structure. I rotated it 180 degrees, allowing the wire to face me. I repositioned the center of the grid, which allowed the corners to fall in. The most surprising part of this, for me, was how flexible the grid material was. It mimicked the quiet folding rhythm of the wire that I was originally attracted to. I wanted to add material for the next portion of this experiment. I kept thinking the wire was behaving like ribbon, so I decided to use ribbon. I also added in a solid background to see how that would affect the images. The letter was already folded from the earlier photographs, so I threaded the ribbon through the current format, trying to follow the same 1/3 up pattern I had before. Photographing in the daylight made visible all the elements of my structure, especially the background. I began cropping vertically in an effort to focus solely on the letter form. This new way of seeing it, with all the lines and angles crossing over one another, all equally in focus, made me realize that I had previously relied on light to create hierarchy and guide the viewer's eye. I slowly tacked up the structure's corners. The straight-on perspective made the character easily identifiable, but I also missed the dramatic forms the letter form had made with an untacked grid. I waited until dark and began photographing the letter with the ribbon entwined. I kept the light strand unplugged and allowed my stand light to illuminate the letter. I liked the chaos it was adding to the grid, but the shape was still falling flat to me. I tried folding it over, as in earlier images, but I felt like I was now covering up the letter with the front grid. It's hard to tell in this image, but I tried weaving the ribbon through the front grid to give it a sense of depth. Something was still missing for me. These last images are the result of a side experiment this week. Rain on Sunday delayed me from working outside on the large version as I had planned, but it made me think about how a mini version of that large grid would look. I took an old citrus bag and yarn and mimicked the same design. I enjoyed the contrast of this piece, the rough plastic grid with the soft folded yarn. It reminded me of needlepoint. I had just watched the lecture on your work that morning, Martin, and some of your methods, with sheets or pieces of acrylic, for example, were fresh in my mind. In the studio, I created a similar setup to my larger installation, hanging the letter form in the center with a white background. I began working a color gel into the images, playing with a reflection of both the letter form and the grid in the image. When reviewing the images, I again found the color distracting, so I converted them to black and white. Eventually, I laid the small object down and let it fold in on itself, much as I had with a large object. For these last 4 images, I tried combining the large and small installations together, moving it off to one side, and even trying the small object inside the fold of the larger one. I don't think any one of these images is particularly successful. Still, this has been an excellent exercise to understand what I found interesting in those original images and how to pursue it further. Adding the ribbon and photographing it against the backdrop enhanced the texture, which is what I wanted. My explorations in rolling and twisting my grid earlier in the week provided me with a more dynamic, animated shape. Looking at these last few images, with their traditional straight shape, made me realize my preference for the former. If I pursue this exercise further, I want to continue adding more texture to the letter form, ribbon, string, wire, until it becomes a mess of jagged lines. I'm curious how the object might react to my twisted grid. Thank you again for watching.